And so there's just so much more that I never have days like that anymore where it's always, I can show you my list of things I need to do this weekend. But one other thing that, again, that was mentioned in New York was that I guess the comic companies, especially the big two, and to some extent the smaller, the top 10 in the diamond charts, are getting more savvy as entertainment companies in how they deal with the press. It never used to be about placement. It never used to be about embargoes. It never used to be. I think one of the big stories that put us on the map, if you look at the two big stories that really put Newsarama on the map, were the Siegel Superman stuff and the DC Wildstorm deal. Both of those, there'd be multiple hoops to jump through today. Not saying we did them just slipshod or just kind of off the cuff, but there would be repercussions today if we did those kinds of stories. I'm not saying specifically about DC or anything, but
what do you mean?
Yeah, what's in terms of them being displeased?
I'm not saying anything specific about any specific publisher, and I wish Jonah was here because he'd agree and it wouldn't be all on me. But I think anybody who does this kind of stuff in the business, if you're talking of me or Jonah on CPR, there are carrots and sticks. There are threats and spankings if you don't perform as they want you to perform. There are, and then there's sometimes there are fields of gray that you're just kind of walking in going, oh God, I hope I don't step on a landmine. I don't know where they are. And you find them. And there was the Marvel Digital Comics initiative when they launched it. A large media outlet, I think it was a Canadian media outlet, broke the embargo on an AP story. If that was print, fine. You pull the copies back in, throw them in the shredder. It went online. And it was a tense evening. It was a very tense evening because the story was supposed to break the next morning in a specified outlet, and then everything filtered down from there. So it was a very, very tense evening. And I have stories. There are stories, and again, Jonah could support me on this, but there are stories like that for every publisher, and even some creators of just, you said too much, you didn't say enough, you said the wrong thing, somebody else said the wrong thing.
Yeah, I can totally, not to the degree, because even at Publishers Weekly, we're not on the line as much as Matt is or Jonah is, but yeah, it's absolutely. It's really, like, even what Tim was saying about, what did Dick Ayers think? It just filters down or up from there, and people get very personal about it. I think that's the thing. It's listening to everybody talk here. It's one of the odd things about the comics industry is that it's a big tent for all of us. It's like there is too much for any one of us to cover, right? And yet, if you said, Matt, you can only cover superheroes now, you'd say, no, I don't want to do that. If you said, Heidi, why don't you just concentrate on indies? That's what you really love. I'd be like, well, I don't want to do that, It's like anytime you give a sane option about covering one facet of the business, you're like, but I love that too. So, and everybody is like this. I'm not sure exactly where I was going with this train of thought, but it's like, you can get like cut off from all this stuff. And like when you say, all right, well, I could slag on Marvel, because I'm not going to get free comics from them anyway, whatever. But right, exactly. But it's like then you still get caught in their little circle or their little cycle. So you really can't escape from any of these levels. And I think that's part of the reason why they take it personally.
I don't know. I kind of disagree with that. Maybe it's just because I have a day job, which means that I don't care if somebody's pissed at me.
Well, that's wonderful.
But I welcome that freedom. Yeah.
That's why we need you.
Do you actually feel like it's affected coverage though, in terms of what you're able to coverage? Isn't that bad?
Yes, it is very bad.
There have been many times, even and before the acquisition or anything like that, where, again, I hate to keep pulling Jonah into this without him being here, but
I feel like Jonah's here.
I know he'd agree.
He's here in spirit.
But there have been many times where you have to think, what's the long-term picture here? This is a business. This is a brand. This is something I'm trying to build. This is something I'm trying, to basically stay employed by. What's the bigger picture here? Do I do this story right now, and am I cutting off my nose to spite my face, or do I hang back a minute or two and let somebody else maybe break it over here in a blog, in a rumor column, and then respond to it that way, and still cover it, but not with the vigor that you could go on, and it sucks. It sucks. But again, and this was something I brought up in New York, that I used to watch the White House press briefings, and there have been a couple times when you see what's her name, Dana Perino, somebody would ask a question and she would just school them. She would just shut them right down 3 ways, and I'd watch that and it was a good question. It was a legitimate good question, and I'd watch that and go, oh man, I've had that exact same thing happen to me. Of we are not commenting, or here is how we feel what that story meant. I didn't write it that way. Here is what that question meant. I've had contentious interviews where you only find out later of the creator, the publisher didn't like that question, and a month later you're calling up and going, is there anything going on? I haven't gotten, these interviews are slow in coming. Is there anything going on? Well, this kind of goes back to such and such office being upset with this interview. Could somebody have told me that earlier? And it's a very...
But, I'll give you a concrete example of this, because this was brought home. Well, it's a general, right, it's a general topic as opposed to a specific example, and I think you and I talked about this back in the Pulse days, but a lot of times a company will call you up and say, we're going to give you the exclusive interview with so-and-so, okay, about such and such. All right, good. He can talk about his new book. And you get that interview, and all right, let's say you're interviewing somebody really interesting, okay? I'm totally making up this example, but say Eddie Campbell. So by the time your writer is at the end of the interview, they might be saying, so what did you think of the From Hell movie, or something like that? Okay, the company will come back to you and be, why were you asking Eddie Campbell about From Hell? This was supposed to be about Batman or Spider-Man. They are pissed at you. Whereas me, as a media outlet, it's like, you're interviewing a very interesting person. Someone reading this might also want to just know something about Eddie Campbell. So how do you shut that? That's right. Absolutely. You're always shut.
But you can't cut that stuff out just
No,
because I tell you.
but I'm saying companies complain about that all the time.
They want company.
And I'm
as I said,
no.
The big publishers are moving towards a place where they want unquestioned, unfiltered, their message coming out. Period. Which, as a business, you can't blame them for.
That's fine. That's what they have a website for.
Right. But that's it is a change though, because it wasn't that way, and it's moving that way, and everyone's kind of having to jostle to it. We kind of a few years ago said, this is going to be, no comics company would ever be like Lucasfilm, where Lucas breaks everything on one of his sites. Clone Wars stuff. Try to fight to get Clone Wars stuff, an announcement about something new coming up. Clone Wars. No, it's all going on StarWars.com. That's where it's being broken. After it's broken, you can do whatever you want, but it's being broken there. And that's how Lucas works. But that's kind of where we are.
But you don't get this from pre-existing book. I'm trying to think of something to call them pre-existing book publishers. I'm talking about the manga publishers or Random House or some of these companies with graphic novel lines, or is this just the comic book companies dealing with fear over changing markets?
Well, is it restricted to the mainstream American?
The book publishers, I don't have.
They don't care.
No,
really
they just want to get the message out as wide and as far as possible.
And which is ironic, because book publishers sell a lot more copies